You're listening to a new episode of The Brave Technologist. This one features two guests who have both been on the podcast before, but are this time joining together. You'll hear from Adam Zarazinski, who's a former intelligence professional that has served as an analyst at Interpol and is an intelligence operations judge advocate with the United States Air Force. Adam's now the CEO of Inca Digital, a fintech company that provides data and analytics on the digital asset ecosystem to the government agencies and financial institutions using natural language processing and LLMs. He was joined this week by Austin Campbell, who is the managing partner and founder of Zero Knowledge Consulting and an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School. Previously, Austin has run the stablecoin platform and portfolio management at Paxos and was the chief risk officer of Paxos National Trust. In this episode, we discuss the Genius stablecoin bill, why this matters, and the potential impact on stablecoin adoption, the brain drain of crypto excerpts within the banking and financial sector, and new compliance experiments and why the traditional approach to compliance checking is dead. And now for this week's episode of The Brave Technologist. Adam and Austin, welcome back to The Brave Technologist. Thanks for coming back again, this time together.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought I would have you both on because there's been so much going on this year, and you both spend more time in DC for good or bad probably than anybody else I know. And so, I think why don't we kick this off? We can kick this off with Adam first too. There seems to be a big shift in the regulatory tone in DC since January. Do you see real change happening, or is it just surface level?
Oh, I think there's real change happening. I'm not the best on policy, so I'll have Austin answer that part. But I think substantively on the ground, just from a business operations perspective, Inca has had more incoming requests from now. I mean, crypto obviously, but not just crypto, from banks, from other parts of TradFi, fintech payments. Than we've had, over the past 3 years combined. I mean, it's crazy how busy it is. So I definitely see it just from a business perspective. I think putting aside the specific policy, just an opening up of U.S. markets. I think a recognition by both by crypto that they can access U.S. markets, but then also recognition by banks and other fintechs hey, it's here. It's time to kind of go hard into crypto and actually build what either actually build what they've been planning on building or figure it out. Because especially a lot on the TradFi side, for example, a lot of the big banks, they have crypto divisions with a couple PhDs in them that make MVPs and POCs that never actually go anywhere and are not profitable. And now they're okay, what do we actually build now that is going to bring profit to this business? I think the start of that is right now.
Awesome. What would you say, Austin?
I would say there are a couple of layers of things that are going on, and here is where it's very interesting to me, because one layer is under the previous administration, there was a almost hysterically anti-crypto tilt towards things. I mean, we've seen it from the SEC. You saw it from the banking regulators, and it really inhibited the ability of people to do any meaningful business in crypto. In a very ironic way, the proliferation of meme coins is probably the legacy of the SEC under Biden, because they prevented people from actually engaging in any commerce, so people stopped. Under the Trump administration, that's done a 180. The SEC has an entire working group. They're asking for comments. The banking regulators are having all sorts of guidance being put out to change the behavior. There's been an executive order recently. But to me, what's also interesting is Congress has changed their view. And in the long run, I think that's more impactful, because Donald Trump is a second-term president. There's only so long he will be here. And if you're a business person, you're probably asking, okay, but if I'm thinking about long-term planning, I have to ask about what comes next. And so seeing Genius become law, right, where now stablecoins are done, Congress would have to go unpass that thing, which is basically something they don't do. We still have laws on the books from 100 years ago plus. And two, clarity passing with a significant margin in the House and coming over to the Senate, and even if it's not going to move in that exact form, the idea that Congress has understood, wait a minute, we've had all these big blow-ups in crypto with things like FTX offshore. We kicked all of the activity out of the United States. Isn't that a recipe for maximum chaos? And shouldn't we do something constructive? To me, I think that's the bigger sea change long-term. And if you think about what Adam was just saying, with banks getting involved, with asset managers getting involved, with payments companies getting involved, I think something like Genius passing is actually the bigger shift in the long run, because now they know this is here to stay and we're going to have to deal with it. Like 4 years ago, Bank of America could ignore stablecoins. Mm-hmm. And what would happen to them? Probably nothing. 4 years from now, if Bank of America has continued ignoring stablecoins, they might have a pretty serious problem.
Yeah, well, why don't we unpack the Genius bill too? Just because it recently passed, and also I know you were pretty close on that one. Why don't we lead off with you? Can you kind of break it down a little bit for the audience who might not be familiar what the Genius Act was and why it matters?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying everybody who thinks that they get to be super excited about this piece of legislation, please pump the brakes, because actually it's pretty boring. And I think that is a feature, not a bug. So if you look in the United States at financial reform, really in 2008, when all kinds of things broke, we've had a snowball rolling downhill from there. And one of the elements like embedded in that snowball has been cash products reform. Because prior to '08, you had people pitching things like government money market funds, bank savings products, prime money market funds, asset-backed commercial paper, structured products based on MBA, like just this giant like spray of stuff. And some of it honestly turned out to be very safe. Like even in 2008, 0 government money market funds broke the buck. But plenty of banks were failing, as we know. A prime money market fund broke the buck because of Lehman. Asset-backed commercial paper completely melted down. And so there's been this reform effort from the financial regulators, which, by the way, if you want something good U.S. financial regulators have done, money market reform is one of the best things they've done post '08, and they get no credit for that. So they basically said, listen, prime funds are risky. You need gates. You need floating NAV. Like, this is not a thing that just infinitely liquid every day. But government money market funds, those seem to work fine. Now, in 2018, this small financial regulator, and by small, I mean by assets, probably the third largest in the world, called the New York Department of Financial Services, was confronted with stablecoins. And do you know what they did? They stole the Fed's homework. They said, wait a minute. Money market reform worked fine. We're going to tell people if you want to do a stablecoin, make it look like a government money market fund. And I will remind the audience that 0 NYDFS regulated stablecoins have ever had peg stability problems. And that includes through FTX, through the collapse of Terraform Labs, through the regional banking crisis, all of them were fine. And so Genius looked at that, which looked at the original money market reform, and yet again, stole their homework. And I would tell you, I think this is best practices in financial regulation, like don't reinvent the wheel. So here's what Genius did, to come all the way back to your question, Luke. It said, if you want to run a government money market fund, here's the deal. Bankruptcy remote, like government money market fund assets only, then you can be a stablecoin. And by the way, by you, we specifically mean U.S. financial companies, because if you're a large public company or foreign company and your business is not primarily financial, not you. So Amazon, you're out. But like PayPal, JP Morgan, you guys are in.
Cool. What do you think that this bill will do for the actual adoption of stablecoins?
This has been the signal that people needed in the United States, that one, you can bank these things, because now it's going to be very hard for a banking regulator to come to you and be like, hey, this thing that Congress specifically passed legislation about saying it was okay, you can't bank that. That gets very difficult. And it gives a bank that's being pressured like a choke point the ability to fight back pretty effectively. 2, it puts all the banks on notice. These things are here, so you need to figure out either how to bank them or how to compete with them or both. And that's going to be transformative. 3, all the payments companies can now be confident we can integrate these things and they're going to work properly. Because Tether is a great business from a profit and expansion perspective. And I think if you listen to Paolo, it's very interesting what the story is, but nobody can say with certainty that Tether will continue to work because they just don't disclose everything and we don't know how the form factor works under the hood. With a Genius stablecoin, if I'm Visa, if I'm MasterCard, if I'm PayPal, if I'm JP Morgan, I can look at this and be like, we know that works. I know where the money is. I know how it's structured. I can let everybody use this and it's fine.
Now, and kind of pivoting over to Adam, like kind of with that shaping up things, it already looks like we're seeing some stablecoin issuers kind of take more of a regional, region by region approach. Like, are there any red flags you guys are seeing, like from the investigation side, or are things more clear with this past year in the changes that you're seeing?
You mean from like a policy perspective in terms of like
investigation,
post Genius with stable coins?
Yeah.
I would say this, generally speaking, our experience has been, regardless of the particular industry, whether it's like, Web3 exchanges, stable coins, other kind of crypto financial service providers, or TradFi getting in, like banks, as the example. Many of them know that they need to get in and don't know how to answer I think where your question is going, don't know how to answer the mail on risk.
Right.
It's not necessarily an easy question to answer. They know that they kind of need to like check the box with a forensics company, right? Like they need one of the forensics tools, but like beyond that, what do we do to actually like answer the mail on the risks we have, like treasury management and treasury risk, non-checking wallets risk that exists. I'll give you just one story. One of the banks that we may work with as part of the deal, they among the other things that they do, they provide liquidity, and they're a nested financial institution to European banks. And they are taking it upon themselves, I think rightfully so, to check transactions of the exchanges where they're providing liquidity and these services. And they tried to use their normal kind of like risk management tools. I don't know which one it was, but you can imagine,
Sure.
the world of those. It's Fiserv, Jack Henry, those types of places. And because of the way just that the exchanges work with, I believe because of the way they work with omnibus accounts, nested accounts, and this is all off-chain data that you merge with on-chain data. Your normal risk tools actually can't do anything. They flag an entire exchange instead of flagging an individual person. So they're basically back to like step one in risk management. And for that particular client, we're trying to work through that and build something out. But I think the theme is that banks and other TradFi players that are moving into crypto are starting from square one when it comes to risk. So the risk itself is kind of the same, like pre-post Genius. Like I think the risks are the same. The way that you do the analysis is more or less the same. Honestly, even like if you look at like the larger financial institution like a bank, the risks introduced by crypto are the same risks that they face elsewhere. It's just faster and slightly different. But they're starting from square one on like what data is needed to actually analyze for these risks. How do you mitigate those risks? Things like that. So it's not introducing new risk, but it's starting from square one on how you address it.
Interesting. Yeah. No, and I'm already seeing some. It seems like kind of bad comparisons or people just not knowing the difference. But Austin, like I keep seeing people talking about stable coins as the same thing as CBDCs, and then at the same time,
that's a bad one.
Our friends in Europe are now talking about leaning towards CBDCs. What's your take on that? Like maybe is there a way you can explain the difference to the audience a little bit?
Yeah, and let me start by saying we probably also need to explain the difference to a lot of bank risk people, which is part of why this space is so confused. Like, to pile on to what Adam was saying, one of the things that I think a lot of the banks are now having an incredibly terrifying realization about is that by being so incredibly adversarial to crypto over the past 4 years, they drove out any employee who knows anything about it. Right? Like, I will jokingly remind people that at one point Citi had all of myself, the guy who's the president of Coin Fund, the current acting chair of the CFTC, the founder of HiveMind, the two co-founders of Modus Capital, the founder of Ubix, the guy who's probably the best professor in this space up at Columbia, and the person who's the head of institutional at Avalanche. The list goes on. But all of those were Citi employees, and they lost every single one of them. And the story has been similar elsewhere. And so the brain drain out of banks on this is incredible. There are close to zero risk officers at any major bank who know anything about crypto.
Wow.
And if you're listening to this and you're senior management at a bank and you're listening to your own people on crypto, you are making a terrible mistake, because anybody who knew what to say to you is gone. And so what that means is we end up with discussions that are just completely deranged about things like CBDCs, because the difference is simple. A true central bank digital currency is money issued by a central bank. It's like a dollar bill, but virtual. And that's kind of the end of the definition as canonical. And then from there, there's this sort of parade of things that fall out that range all the way from call it the cyberpunk / cypherpunk ideal of these cryptographic digital dollars that can never be traced that exist on cred sticks, all the way to fully programmable money that if we think you're too fat, we can ban you from buying junk food with it kind of uses, and everything in the middle. But I'm going to roll people back to ask an even more important personal question. How many people think they get great customer service from the government? Because the problem with being an issuer of electronic money is at some point grandma's going to lose her keys and you've got to help her. Right? And this is why historically this has been outsourced to the banks, because the first and best way to get your government overthrown is to with people's money. And I think governments are going to find out actually it's the customer service part that's going to be really bad. So what's a stablecoin? It is yet again just another form of the exact monetary system we already have. When you need money, you go to JP Morgan Chase, you go to Bank of America, you go to Wells Fargo, you might go to PayPal. You're not going literally to the Federal Reserve down on Maiden Lane and being like, I demand customer service. They've completely outsourced that. And so stable coins are just this again, and whether it's in the form of a bank deposit or a money market fund. And again, for anybody who thinks this is crazy, I'll remind everybody, you can get a debit card from Fidelity where you can pay for things with a government money market fund right now, in your Fidelity account. We already do this, so it's just an extension of the current system.
Interesting, yeah. And switching gears a tiny bit, I've been really interested to get your take on this, Adam. And it might be that you're not hearing anything, but recently there have been, and just in the past week, but also in the past year, we're seeing things like age verification on websites where people are having to upload IDs, like in Texas and in Florida. But then even more recently in the UK, we're starting to see a lot of new, safe, quote unquote, safety acts coming into play. And I'm interested if does this impact Inca? Are you guys getting more types of requests outside of finance in some of these new areas? So I would imagine that with what you guys do, there might be some benefit to tapping, Intel kind of services in trying to keep people safe, or maybe no one's even said anything, which I wouldn't be surprised to hear either. I'm just kind of curious what your take is on whether that is, whether you guys are hearing more about it, and also what's your take on just these new laws that are coming into play.
Oh yeah, dude, all sorts of random requests coming in, all sorts of stuff. I'll tell you one funny story, and then a story about a potentially new client that I just talked to. First, yeah. So the whole I think at a high level, image verification with IDs it's a terrible solution, but the best one that we have right now. In terms of doing things like at scale. And a great example of that is what was the name of that app where it was like women rating the dudes that they dated, and it was only
Was it
T-App?
T
It was
or something
T-App.
like that?
T-App.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
T-App. So, so we that data set got leaked. We grabbed everything because it is going to have an implication on KYC, right? Like that data is going to be used by scammers, by money launderers, to get KYC verified accounts everywhere. Everywhere. It was like tens of thousands of images of women with their driver's licenses, IDs, what they, it's just like their addresses, like everything.
Damn.
Which is pretty wild. And so easily forgeable once you have that picture, right? So we have that data set now. We're not necessarily sure exactly what we're going to do with it yet, but we're going to integrate it into a product at some point. But yeah, we're getting all sorts of random requests. A big one that I think is close to what you're asking is what's going on with North Koreans getting hired in the tech sector. Right. And so like there are some companies that are doing like really good work here. I just spoke to some of the folks at Chainlink that are doing good work for themselves, right, to make sure that they don't do anything there. And we're getting asked more and more to verify, new hires, current hires on where they live, who they are, things like that. And so we have a whole kind of process now to look through that, which does not include, by the way, Austin's suggestion was that every single person that you interview has to tear up a picture of Kim Jong-un live on it should weed out everybody very quickly.
Awesome.
But
yeah, just make him call him a stupid fat guy with no fashion sense, and you're going to weed out the majority of North Koreans right there.
But yeah, so we're getting those requests. I mean, most of them are still within the context of like crypto or finance, but now beyond like what we would traditionally do. Like it's risk intelligence, but like with a twist. And then obviously there's like huge national security implications to that too, right?
Right.
Even with stablecoins, right? I mean, like, as far as stablecoins are a national security prerogative, the fact that we might have, North Korean hackers with, admin access to GitHub repos is a great thing, right?
Right.
And so like that's a big one. And I think obviously as we go, part of what we're trying to do is address broader KYC issues. How do we find bad guys beyond just looking at their IDs? We're trying. Yeah,
that's a good segue into my next question. I mean, we're starting to see kind of an emergence of new compliance experiments or models, like with what WorldCoin's doing and privacy pools and things that are starting to use more ZK methodology and implementations, or even just alternative KYC approaches. What's the state of the state on that? Is it looking promising but early, or is it problematic, or are people putting too much faith in security theater? What do you guys? I guess Adam, if you want to start, and then maybe I'll kick it to Austin too.
Yeah, sure. Promising but early, I think is the right is my answer. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on, both like on the on-chain side with identification, which is promising. But like, hasn't necessarily been used at scale, like real scale yet. And then you've got efforts like ours where we're just trying to amass enough OSINT that we can try to say who a person really knows shit is, whether they're a good guy or a bad guy, right? And even for us, I mean, like, the tools that we're building are promising but early, even though it's not on-chain work, right? And I think where we currently are is a problem and actually affects people, right? People in other parts of the world that don't necessarily have identification at all, or really shitty identification, or the current facial recognition models have trouble identifying one person from another, debanks those people, right? It's literally part of the reason why those people are not banked with current products. So like this is a real issue that needs to be solved. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. It's a big ass problem. The exchanges know it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when I talk to like the founders at the different exchanges, KYC, the amount of money, it's super expensive. The amount of money that they have to spend on KYC, and then the crappy job that those tools do limits how many people they're able to get in certain parts of the world. And that's something that crypto is trying active, like crypto, big C crypto is like the big project is trying to solve, right? Like we're trying to bank people globally. But then we have these hurdles like KYC, that is a solvable problem with on-chain and off-chain solutions, but it's still early. Yeah.
What do you say, Austin?
So I think one thing that is actively unhelpful in solving this problem is what I previously said, which is a lot of the people who need to solve this problem do not have the talent that they need to solve this problem, which is contributing to the issue. Right. I think over the next 5-ish years, with the emergence of AI and deep fakes and, increasing numbers of hacks, getting the kind of data that Adam's got his hands on from the T-app, you're going to live in a world where the current bank compliance regime just breaks down completely. Like if what you're doing is what you do currently, you're just going to constantly get defrauded. And that is what it is. And you're going to facilitate all kinds of bad activity. And the days of, I have a 60-year-old compliance person who still struggles with email, but boy, does this guy have intuition about local lending, is probably over. Because that's just not the nature of the business that you're trying to do anymore, right? We see this all the time. Anytime you want to look at, oh, there was a big ledger issue and people lost a bunch of data, or, oh, some bank was being used as a conduit for money laundering domestically. Internationally is a whole different story, but like domestically, it's always small banks that are under-resourced on this stuff, right? Like it's never like literally JP Morgan, but it'll be something like, Evolve in the Synapse fiasco or something like that. That's like, oh, they were totally compromised. And it's like, well, yeah, this is 21 dudes in Arkansas and we're expecting them to build a world-class compliance program to deal with like the North Koreans. Like, what are we doing here? Right? Like, it's no shock they failed, and that's not an insult. Like, I wouldn't have succeeded either in those circumstances. And so I think what Adam is revealing here is there is a deeper need for talented technological transformation in this entire industry, and crypto and TradFi are sort of colliding on that point. Let's be totally honest. Crypto has been better at some areas and TradFi has been better at some areas, but neither of them independently are getting a passing grade.
Yeah, I mean, I even think that, kind of mixing the two topics from earlier where, because I was seeing YouTube was even talking about around, children and age inference with AI and like kind of trying to determine if a kid is, or if a user is a kid based on what they're watching and doing, et cetera. I mean, it just seems like in the current landscape with AI that it's just rife for false positives with everything. And it seems like the traditional compliance approach is just dead. Like, how else do you do? You're going to have more layers to do it, right? Like, Adam, is that kind of? I mean, that's kind of what Inca does, right? Like,
That's
I mean, not to shamelessly plug you, but that's kind of, it just seems like, yeah. I mean, how else are you going to do it? The AI is not great enough to be able to do this with, any confidence yet. Even though everybody hyping it would love to claim that it is, but it just seems like there's not enough tube in the toothpaste.
With the amount of SpongeBob that I watch on YouTube, I'm definitely going to be classified as a child. I'm not going to be able to watch anything anymore.
Fair enough. How seriously are institutions taking some of these new ZK implementations? Like, Austin, are you hearing anything on that front at all, or any experiments?
They mostly don't know how to use them yet.
Got it.
Like, which is not to say they're not taking them seriously, but rather they kind of don't know what to do with it, right? Like I'll jokingly say with many financial institutions, this would be like us in the current day being teleported back to like 1500 and trying to explain things like the internet to people, and they'll just be like, what is this magic, right? Like, yeah. I mean, think about it. In the modern world, with all the capabilities we had, if we appeared to the ancient Greeks, we'd literally be gods, right? Like, we're flying through the air and sending messages instantaneously globally. Amazing. But like, it's kind of that for them trying to like use ZK proofs. Like, again, Chase can't can get me two-factor authentication with anything other than an SMS, and we think these people are going to use ZK proofs.
Right. That seems fair.
Yeah, it doesn't. But one caveat to that: it doesn't mean that they're unwilling to try, or that they're unwilling to like hire help to like explore that as an option, right? It's just like at most of these financial institutions, they just don't have the technological capacity in-house to do so. But they are willing to be like, oh, okay, like how does this, and then they'll think very practically about like how this affects their business, how they can actually incorporate these things. And that's why this is such a boon for, Luke, the industry that you were talking about, right? You've got all these different tool sets coming onto the market that are going to see like significant growth, because ultimately they're going to have to do those things if they want to grow, and don't want to face the current hurdles that they have. So they're open to it. They just don't have the tech capacity in-house to do it. That's
awesome.
They'll spend money on it, though.
And we covered a lot here today. I'm really curious, and I can start with Adam on this one. Like, Adam, you're CEO. Your job's to kind of rank order priorities, right? Like, what's the number one priority in your problem set that you all are working on at Inca right now? If you can tell me.
That's a good question.
Or you could even do top three.
Yeah, well, I would say, Two things in your question. First, we've been talking a lot about stablecoins. It is absolutely up there. It's top three for sure. We're seeing growth. Like we're landing a bunch of stablecoin clients. We're looking at new ways to help them manage that risk. Again, all outside of what the forensics companies do, right? We're looking at secondary markets. We're looking at off-chain risk. We're helping stablecoins manage their treasuries for like treasury type risk. So that is one of our top priorities. I would say the other one is exploring ways to help take down the bad guys that are non-traditional. So in the traditional model, right, even for Inca, the traditional model is we provide intelligence to law enforcement, and then law enforcement goes and does the finish, right? In the kind of special operator find, fix, finish model, right? They do the finish. Inca is taking that over in new ways. So we're starting to do things like we still obviously have law enforcement clients and provide them intelligence, but now we're filing lawsuits ourselves. So we're filing civil lawsuits ourselves. We're freezing assets ourselves. We're giving money back to victims ourselves. And in the civil court system, at least in the US, it's actually fairly flexible on what you can do. The reason we're doing this is because, quite frankly, I think law enforcement moves too slow. It doesn't have, continuing the theme, doesn't have the technological capacity that they need to do this at scale and speed. But we do, and we can do it so long as we can take advantage of the court system, which again goes back to the broader point on whether it's stablecoins or the growth of crypto generally. I think it's super important for the industry to have some accountability, right? When bad guys do bad things, we're just taking over the issuance of the accountability ourselves a little bit. So I think that's super important for the industry, and it's one of Inca's top priorities to kind of grow that line of work for what we're doing.
Awesome. How about you, Austin?
So I think the number one on my list is trying to get people on both sides to be realistic about what it's going to take to bring RWAs on chain if we want to grow this space, because I think there are some deep misconceptions on the TradFi side about, hey, we're going to be able to control everything in walled gardens the way we always do, right? And on the crypto side, some deep misconceptions about, hey, we're going to be able to retain all our cypherpunk ideals and everything's going to be permissionless, right? And both of those are completely wrong. And like the example I use to talk about this is I ask people like, well, if we tokenize grandma's house and it gets hacked and the North Koreans end up with it, do you think they legally own grandma's house now? And interestingly, there are a subset of like permissionless Bitcoin maxis who will go, yup. And number one, let me tell you, boy, will the U.S. military have things to say about that. I don't think they're going to let the North Koreans just move in. And this comes to a key point about RWAs, which is real assets are not decentralized. They exist in the real world. They're either securities that attach to a real corporation with real people in those cases, or they're like literal physical assets. So this whole sort of idea of decentralization stops making sense when I ask people things like, well, how do you decentralize your physical house, right? Like, that's not a thing. So one, that. Two, these things have to be responsive to real world concerns, right? Again, if the North Koreans hack the NFT and then the North Koreans try to sell it, somebody tries to move in, a court is going to be like, no, right? And now you have a problem of the ledger that you have electronically does not reflect the reality of what's going on in the world. So now your ledger is useless. And so, okay, we need permissioned ledgers in some form, but this is where I'm pointing out the lack of sophistication on both sides. Is like, I was literally arguing with, Tolly, who's one of the founders of Solana, about this recently on Twitter. And he was like, well, I mean, there's controls for the assets. And I'm like, what if they are the ones who got hacked?
Right.
What is your procedure for like completely replacing a token that got hacked? And if anybody tells me, oh, you just drop a new token, let me tell you, as the guy running BUSD, wow, does that all of DeFi, right? Because suddenly we have all these LP pools that now one token is repudiated and instantly work. Like, the level of coordination for that to work across an ecosystem is non-trivial. Maybe possible, but nothing is built that way right now. The other option is you need validator level controls where people at the network level will be like, I don't think so, and just revert everything. And there are very few chains that have put serious thought into that, right? Like, to give Adam some credit here, Inca was involved in the Cetus hack. They helped Miston Labs partially control an incident like that. There are things that have been thought about, like Avalanche subnets or like Stellar's permission validator structure, that maybe totally solve it. But these are things that many of the crypto natives are uncomfortable with because they want decentralization. So I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on both sides to come to reality on that. Right now, they're kind of believing in their ideological biases, but reality has a way of intervening in that over the long run.
Ain't that the truth? That's where real world things meet up with the magic internet beans, right? Like, Adam, Austin, you guys, I really appreciate you guys making the time today to come and update the audience on everything. And I'd love to have you guys back in the future to opine on the latest happenings.
Sounds good. Happy to be back at some point.
Right on. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time, Luke.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to the Brave Technologist podcast. To never miss an episode, make sure you hit follow in your podcast app. If you haven't already made the switch to the Brave browser, you can download it for free today at brave.com and start using Brave Search, which enables you to search the web privately. Brave also shields you from the ads, trackers, and other creepy stuff following you across the web.